My daughter-in-law ripped the brooch off my chest at her anniversary party and dropped it on a napkin like garbage. She told the guests it was worthless costume jewelry from a thrift store. She didn't know she was holding a 30-carat pink diamond that once belonged to the Romanov family. She didn't know it was worth $5 million. And she didn't know I was about to let her auction it off for $1, just so I could destroy her in front of everyone. Please drop your name and where you are watching from in the comments below, because subscribers sometimes appear as characters in my stories. My name is Eleanor Vance, and I am 70 years old. I live alone in a small house in Connecticut, the kind of house that people drive past without a second glance. To most people who meet me, I'm just a quiet widow living on a modest pension and Social Security. They see my simple clothes from the clearance rack at the department store. They see my secondhand furniture and my overgrown garden and my ancient car in the driveway. They see an old woman with nothing of value, nothing worth noticing, nothing worth respecting. What they do not see is what I carry with me every single day. They do not see where I come from or the blood that runs through my veins. They do not know that my grandmother was Duchess Anastasia Volkov and that she fled St. Petersburg in the winter of 1918 with diamonds sewn into the lining of her coat. I can still see her in my mind sometimes. A young woman of 23 years old, running through the snow with her infant daughter pressed against her chest. The Bolsheviks had taken everything from her family, the palaces and the servants and the privilege of centuries. But they could not take what she had hidden in the seams of her clothing, the jewels that would keep her daughter alive through the long journey to Paris and eventually to America. I have one piece of jewelry that I wear every single day, a brooch that my grandmother gave to my mother and my mother gave to me. It does not look like anything special to the untrained eye. The metal setting is tarnished with age, darkened to an almost black color that makes it look cheap. The stone in the center appears cloudy and dull, almost like a piece of old glass that has been scratched and worn by decades of handling. People have called it ugly to my face, and my daughter-in-law has called it garbage more times than I can count. But she does not know what she is looking at when she sneers at my chest. She does not know that this cloudy stone has a name that makes auction houses tremble with excitement. It is called the Tsar's Tear, and it is 30 carats of uncut pink diamond. It belonged to the Romanov family before my grandmother smuggled it out of Russia in her coat. It is worth more than $5 million at conservative estimate, more than Tiffany Blair will ever earn in her entire life. But I never told anyone the truth about this brooch, not even my late husband Harold, who passed away 8 years ago, not my son David, who thinks I am just a simple old woman with old-fashioned taste in jewelry. No one knows, because I learned long ago that value is not about price tags or appraisals, or what other people think something is worth. Value is about the story that a thing carries within it, the history and the sacrifice and the survival that it represents. This brooch carries the story of my family's survival across a century and 3 continents, and that story is worth more than any number. My son David married Tiffany Blair 2 years ago, and I knew something was wrong from the very first moment I met her. She was 26 years old then, beautiful in the way that Instagram filters and professional lighting can make anyone beautiful. She was confident and ambitious and constantly talking about her brand and her followers and her vision for the future. She called herself a jewelry influencer, which apparently meant that she posted photographs of herself wearing diamonds and gold to her 200,000 followers on Instagram. Her company was called Tiff's Luxe, and she claimed to sell ethically sourced diamonds and 18-karat gold to women who wanted affordable luxury. Her followers believed she was living a glamorous life of champagne and designer clothes and exotic vacations. But from the moment I shook her hand at our first meeting, I could see the calculation behind her smile. The way she looked at my house with barely concealed disgust, her eyes cataloging everything and finding it all worthless. The way she looked at my clothes as if I had arrived at dinner wearing a garbage bag. The way she looked at me like I was something to be tolerated rather than respected, an obstacle rather than a person. I smiled and welcomed her to the family, because that is what mothers do. But I watched her very carefully from that day forward. Their first wedding anniversary party was held at the Westbrook Country Club, an exclusive venue with manicured lawns and crystal chandeliers and membership fees that cost more than my annual income. Tiffany had organized every detail herself, and every detail screamed of money that I suspected did not actually exist. The decorations were white and gold, with fresh flowers imported from Holland and ice sculptures shaped like swans. The champagne was Dom Perignon, and the guests were her influencer friends and business contacts, beautiful young people who all looked like they had stepped out of a magazine advertisement. I wore my best dress to the party, a navy blue silk that my mother had given me 40 years ago. It was simple but elegant, the kind of classic style that never goes out of fashion. And of course, I wore my brooch pinned over my heart, where it always sits, where it has sat every day for the past 30 years. Tiffany spotted it immediately from across the ballroom, and I watched her face twist with disgust as she made her way toward me through the crowd. She was wearing a white gown that probably cost $3,000, and she carried a glass of champagne in her manicured hand like a weapon. Her smile was sharp like a knife as she approached me, bright and beautiful and completely false. "Mother Vance," she said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear, "what on earth is that thing on your chest?" "My brooch," I replied calmly, though my heart had begun to beat faster. "It belonged to my mother." She leaned in closer, pretending to examine it with exaggerated interest while wrinkling her nose in theatrical disgust. "Is that glass?" she asked, her voice carrying across the room. "Oh my God, it looks like something from a thrift store. Or maybe a dollar store." Several guests had turned to watch our interaction, and I could see them smiling at Tiffany's wit. I felt heat rise to my cheeks as the humiliation washed over me in waves. Then Tiffany reached toward my chest with her perfectly manicured fingers. "Here, let me help you," she said sweetly, though her eyes were cold. "You really shouldn't wear garbage to a party like this. I'll lend you something from my new collection." Before I could stop her, she had unpinned the brooch from my dress. I felt the clasp give way, felt the weight of 5 generations lift from my chest, and felt completely powerless to prevent it. She held up the Tsar's tear like it was evidence of a crime, turning it back and forth so everyone could see how ugly and worthless it appeared. "See?" she announced to the watching guests. "Costume jewelry. Probably worth 50 cents at a yard sale." Then she dropped it onto a napkin on the table beside us, letting it fall like it was trash that had been stuck to her fingers. I looked across the room and saw David standing near the bar, watching everything that was happening. Our eyes met, and I silently begged him to say something, to defend me, to stop his wife from humiliating his mother. He said nothing, and after a moment he looked away and ordered another drink. That silence from my own son hurt worse than anything Tiffany had done. I quietly retrieved my brooch from the napkin and pinned it back to my dress, my hands trembling slightly. Then I excused myself from the party and drove home alone through the dark Connecticut night. I sat in my living room for a long time that evening, holding the brooch in my hands and thinking about my grandmother. I thought about everything she had survived, the revolution and the escape and the decades of rebuilding in a foreign country. I thought about the promise I had made to my mother on her deathbed, the promise to protect this piece of our history. And I thought about Tiffany's face as she dropped my grandmother's legacy onto a napkin like garbage. A memory surfaced unbidden, sharp and painful in its contrast to what had just happened. I remembered Tiffany at the wedding 2 years ago, before her true nature had fully revealed itself. She had approached me with tears glistening in her eyes, looking nervous and young and genuinely hopeful. "Mother Vance," she had said softly, taking both of my hands in hers, "I just want you to know how happy I am to be joining your family. David is everything to me, and I promise I will take care of him. We're family now, you and me." I had believed her in that moment, had seen something real in her eyes that made me think perhaps I had misjudged her. What had changed her, I wondered? Or had she been performing even then? Was it the pressure of maintaining her influencer image? The constant need to appear successful? Or had the kind young woman at the wedding been the performance, and the cruel socialite at the party been the truth? It didn't matter anymore, I realized, as I sat in the darkness. Whatever she had been or could have been, she had chosen her path. I made my decision that night, sitting alone with my grandmother's brooch. I would not cry, and I would not complain to David or anyone else. I would watch and I would wait, because predators always reveal themselves if you give them enough time. 2 weeks after the anniversary party, Tiffany appeared at my house without warning or invitation. She brought an interior designer with her, a young man in expensive glasses who immediately began photographing my furniture without permission. "Mother Vance," Tiffany announced as she swept through my front door like she owned the place, "we are going to renovate this house for you. It's so outdated, so dark, so depressing. You need a modern, minimalist aesthetic." "I do not want a renovation," I said firmly. "I like my house exactly as it is." She smiled at me with that particular expression of pity that young people reserve for the elderly. "Of course you think that, but you'll thank me when it's done. Trust me, I have an eye for design." The designer was already taking photographs of my antique writing desk, the one that had belonged to my grandfather. He was measuring my grandmother's armchair, the one she had brought with her from Paris. He was examining my collection of first edition books with the calculating eye of someone assessing their resale value. "All of this has to go," Tiffany declared, waving her hand dismissively at my belongings. "It's just clutter. Old people always hoard things they don't need." "These are my memories," I said quietly, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Please do not touch them." Tiffany looked at me with exaggerated concern, tilting her head like a therapist dealing with a difficult patient. "Mother Vance," she said slowly, as if speaking to a child, "are you feeling all right? You seem confused." She turned to the designer with an knowing look. "Sometimes older people get disoriented about what's important. They develop unhealthy attachments to objects." Then she turned back to me with that false smile. "Maybe we should talk to David about getting you some professional help. There are wonderful facilities these days for people in your situation." I recognized exactly what she was doing because I had read about it in psychology books. Gaslighting, they call it. The systematic attempt to make someone doubt their own perception of reality. She was trying to make me seem senile so she could take control of my life and my possessions. But I am not senile. And I am sharper at 70 than Tiffany Blair will ever be at any age. "I understand your concern," I said calmly, "but I assure you that I am perfectly capable of making my own decisions." The renovation chaos continued for 3 days, despite my protests. Workers came and went at all hours, moving furniture and packing boxes and taking photographs of everything I owned. On the 3rd day of this invasion, I noticed that something was missing from my bedroom. My jewelry box. The small wooden box with the brass clasp where I kept the brooch every night. I searched my entire bedroom, then the entire house, growing more frantic with each passing minute. Finally, I found Tiffany in my kitchen, scrolling through her phone without a care in the world. "Where is my jewelry box?" I asked, and my voice was harder than I intended. She didn't even look up from her screen. "Oh, that old thing? I decluttered it for you. It went to the donation bin." My heart stopped for a moment, then started again at twice the normal speed. "You gave away my jewelry box without asking me?" Tiffany finally looked up, her expression one of bored annoyance. "Relax, Mother Vance. There was nothing valuable in there anyway. Just that ugly brooch you're so attached to and some costume jewelry that looked like it came from a cereal box." She went back to her phone. "You should thank me for clearing out the garbage. This house is going to look amazing when we're done." I stood very still in my own kitchen, controlling my breathing and forcing myself not to react. I looked past Tiffany at her laptop sitting open on my counter. The screen was visible, and I could see a website that made my blood run cold. It was an auction site, and there was a draft listing on the screen with a photograph I recognized. My brooch, the Tsar's Tear, 30 carats of Romanov history. The listing title said, Vintage Style Brooch, Costume Jewelry, and the starting price was $10. She had not donated my jewelry box to charity at all. She was planning to sell my grandmother's diamond for $10. Something shifted deep inside me in that moment, a fundamental change that could never be reversed. The patient grandmother who tolerated insults and smiled through humiliation disappeared forever. In her place, the guardian of my family's legacy opened her eyes and began to see clearly. I did not confront Tiffany about what I had seen on her computer screen. I did not demand that she return my brooch or threaten to tell David what she had done. Instead, I made a strategic decision that my grandmother would have approved of. I would let Tiffany proceed with her plans, and I would watch her dig her own grave. I wanted to see exactly how far she was willing to go, and I wanted to be ready when she finally fell. The next morning, I drove to Hartford to visit an old friend named Marcus Sterling. Marcus is 82 years old, with silver hair and steady hands, and eyes that can spot a fake diamond from across a room. He spent 40 years as the chief gemologist for Christie's auction house before his retirement. He has authenticated crown jewels and celebrity collections, and pieces of history worth hundreds of millions of dollars. More importantly, he knew my grandmother, and he knows exactly what the Tsar's Tear is worth. "Eleanor," he said as he welcomed me into his study, "it has been far too long since you visited." "I need your expertise, Marcus," I said, handing him a folder of photographs I had printed that morning. "Tell me what you see in these pictures." The photographs were screenshots from Tiffany's website, images of her Tiff's Luxe collection. The diamonds she claimed were ethically sourced from responsible mines. The gold she advertised as 18-carat Italian craftsmanship. The pieces she sold to her followers for hundreds and sometimes thousands of dollars. Marcus examined the photographs carefully, holding each one up to the light and studying it with his expert eye. Then he began to laugh, a dry, humorless sound. "Eleanor, these are not diamonds. They are cubic zirconia, industrial-grade glass that costs about $2 per carat." He pointed to specific details in the photographs. "The gold is plated brass. You can see the wear patterns here and here." He set down the photographs and looked at me seriously. "This entire collection is worth maybe $50 total. She is committing fraud on a massive scale." "That is exactly what I suspected," I said. "What can be done about it?" Marcus leaned forward with interest. "False advertising of this magnitude would attract the attention of the Federal Trade Commission. Her customers could file a class action lawsuit for fraud." He paused. "But you would need solid evidence to prove the deception." "I can get the evidence," I said, "but I need to wait for the right moment." Marcus smiled because he understood what I was planning without me having to explain. He had known my family for decades, and he knew what the women of my bloodline were capable of when provoked. "When you are ready," he said, "I will be there to help." 3 weeks later, Tiffany announced her biggest event yet on her social media channels. A charity gala at the Worthington Hotel, the most prestigious venue in the entire state. The evening would feature a silent auction, a live auction, and the official launch of her new luxury collection. She invited influencers from across the country, wealthy buyers looking for investment pieces, and media representatives from fashion magazines. She also decided to include my brooch in the auction, not as a valuable item, but as a joke. The starting bid was $1, and she called it vintage costume jewelry in the listing. She told her followers that including such a worthless piece would add variety and show that even ugly things can find a home. She invited me to attend the gala personally, delivering the invitation with her usual condescending smile. "Come and say goodbye to your little trinket, Mother Vance. But please wear something decent. I don't want you embarrassing me in front of important people." I accepted the invitation with grace and gratitude. "Thank you so much, Tiffany. I wouldn't miss it for anything in the world. That night, after she left, I opened my closet and reached into the very back where my most precious possessions were stored. Wrapped in tissue paper and preserved in a cedar garment bag was a dress I had not worn in 30 years. It was silk, hand-stitched in Paris by a couturier who had dressed European royalty. My grandmother had worn it to embassy balls and state dinners in a life that seemed like a fairy tale now. I took it out and held it up to the light, and the fabric shimmered like liquid silver. I tried it on, and despite the decades that had passed, it still fit perfectly. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw not a poor old widow, but the granddaughter of Duchess Anastasia Volkov. The night before the gala, David came to visit me unexpectedly. He looked troubled, with dark circles under his eyes and a nervous energy in his movements. "Mom," he said, sitting down heavily on my grandmother's couch, "maybe you shouldn't go to the gala tomorrow. Tiffany can be cruel sometimes, and I don't want you to get hurt." I looked at my son, this man I had raised to be kind and good, and wondered how he had become so passive. "David," I said, "come with me. There is something I need to show you." I led him to my study and opened the antique cabinet where I kept my most important documents. Inside was a photo album bound in leather, its pages yellow with age. There were documents written in Russian, official papers with elaborate seals and signatures. And there was a certificate bearing the crest of the Romanov imperial family. "David," I said, "there are things about our family that you do not know. Things I should have told you long ago." I opened the photo album and showed him photographs of my grandmother as a young woman in St. Petersburg. I showed him the documents that proved her title and her lineage. I showed him the certificate of authentication for the Tsar's tear, signed by 3 independent gemologists, including Marcus Sterling. My grandmother was Duchess Anastasia Volkov, I explained. She fled Russia during the Revolution, with nothing but the clothes on her back and the jewels sewn into her coat. David stared at the documents with wide eyes, his hands trembling slightly as he turned the pages. "That brooch Tiffany took from me," I continued, "is not costume jewelry. It is called the Tsar's tear." I paused to let the weight of my words sink in. It is a 30-carat, uncut, pink diamond that once belonged to the Romanov family. It is worth more than $5 million. David looked up at me with tears forming in his eyes. "Mom, I had no idea. I am so sorry. I should have stopped Tiffany at the party. I should have protected you." I took his hand in mine, feeling the trembling of his fingers. "Tomorrow night," I said, "you will have a chance to make things right. Will you help me?" He nodded without hesitation. "Whatever you need, Mom. I'm with you." The gala was held in the grand ballroom of the Worthington Hotel on a perfect autumn evening. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls, casting rainbow light across white tablecloths and silver place settings. 300 guests filled the room, beautiful people in beautiful clothes drinking champagne and admiring the auction items. Tiffany stood on the stage at the front of the ballroom, resplendent in a glittering gown that probably cost more than my car. She was live-streaming the event to her followers, her smile bright and confident as she welcomed everyone to the launch of her new collection. I entered through the main doors at exactly 8 o'clock, and the room seemed to pause. I was wearing my grandmother's silver dress, and my posture was straight as a queen's. My expression was calm and serene, betraying nothing of the anticipation burning inside me. Conversations faltered as heads turned to watch me walk across the ballroom floor. I was not the pathetic old widow they had expected to see. Tiffany spotted me from the stage, and I watched her confident smile flicker with confusion. She recovered quickly and grabbed the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "I want to introduce my mother-in-law, Eleanor Vance. She has generously donated some vintage items to our auction tonight." She picked up my brooch from the display table, holding it up for everyone to see. The Tsar's tear looked dull and worthless under the bright stage lights, exactly as she intended. "Including this charming little piece of costume jewelry," she continued with a smirk. "Starting bid is $1. Any takers?" The audience chuckled politely, and a few people raised their paddles as a joke. Tiffany was enjoying herself immensely, savoring my public humiliation. Even worthless things deserve a chance to find a home, she added, and the laughter grew louder. I stood motionless in the center of the ballroom, waiting. Then a voice rang out from the back of the room, sharp and commanding. "Stop! Do not touch that brooch without gloves." Every head in the ballroom turned toward the source of the voice. A man in an impeccable charcoal suit was walking toward the stage with the confident stride of absolute authority. Behind him came two assistants carrying equipment cases. Marcus Sterling had arrived. "Excuse me?" Tiffany said, her smile faltering. "Who are you? This is a private event." "My name is Marcus Sterling," he announced, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "Chief Appraiser Emeritus for Christie's Auction House, with 50 years of experience in gemological authentication." He reached the stage and put on a pair of white cotton gloves with deliberate precision. "And that brooch you are holding is not costume jewelry." He took the Tsar's tear from Tiffany's suddenly trembling hands and examined it under a portable light his assistants had set up. The room was completely silent. 300 people holding their breath. Marcus took his time, studying the stone from every angle, consulting a loupe, making notes. Finally, he looked up and addressed the crowd. "This," he announced, "is a 30-carat uncut pink diamond of exceptional quality and extraordinary provenance." Gasps echoed through the ballroom. "It is known as the Tsar's tear, and it belonged to the Romanov imperial family before the Russian Revolution. It was smuggled out of St. Petersburg in 1918 by Duchess Anastasia Volkov." He paused for effect. "My conservative estimate of its value is $5 million. Tiffany's face had gone completely white, drained of all color and confidence. "That's impossible," she stammered. "It's just old glass. My mother-in-law is nobody. She lives on a pension." Marcus turned to me and inclined his head in a slight bow. "Your Grace," he said formally, "I apologize on behalf of this establishment for the mishandling of your family's heirloom." The room erupted in whispered confusion. "Your Grace? Duchess? Did he say Romanov?" Tiffany was shaking visibly now, her perfect composure completely shattered. "This is ridiculous," she shouted into the microphone. "This old woman is lying. She's senile. She's making all of this up." I stepped forward, and the crowd parted before me like water. I did not raise my voice because I did not need to. "I never claimed to be anything, Tiffany," I said calmly. "You assumed I was worthless because I live simply. You assumed my possessions were garbage because they looked old and worn." I paused and met her eyes. "You were wrong." Marcus was not finished with his revelations. "While I am here," he said, "perhaps I should examine your collection as well, Mrs. Blair." He walked to the display table where Tiffany's luxe pieces were arranged on velvet. He picked up a necklace that was advertised as containing 2 carats of ethically sourced diamonds. He looked at it for exactly 3 seconds. "This is cubic zirconia," he announced. "Industrial-grade glass, worth approximately $4. He picked up a bracelet. Plated brass, not 18-karat gold. He picked up a ring, glass and copper. Total value, perhaps 60 cents. The large screen behind the stage flickered to life, and I saw David standing at the control panel. Images began to appear on the screen, the evidence I had gathered over the past 3 weeks. Screenshots of Alibaba listings showing the wholesale suppliers Tiffany used. Import invoices proving she paid $2 for pieces she sold for $200. Side-by-side comparisons of her products and the cheap Chinese originals. Email exchanges where she discussed deceiving her customers. The livestream comments exploded with fury. "Fraud! Scammer! I paid $500 for that necklace. Someone call the police! Class action lawsuit, now!" Tiffany grabbed the microphone with both hands, her voice cracking with desperation. No, this is not true. I was deceived by my suppliers. They lied to me about the materials. I'm a victim here." But nobody was listening to her excuses anymore. Buyers were surrounding the display table, demanding refunds and threatening lawsuits. Influencers who had promoted her brand were frantically deleting their posts. Someone had already called the authorities, and I could hear sirens approaching in the distance. 2 security guards approached Tiffany on the stage, their expressions grim and businesslike. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us. The police have some questions." Tiffany looked around the ballroom with wild eyes, searching for an escape that didn't exist. Her gaze landed on me, standing calmly in my grandmother's silver dress. "You planned this," she whispered. "You destroyed me." "No, Tiffany," I replied. "You destroyed yourself. I simply let everyone see the truth." The security guards escorted her off the stage and through a side door. The gala was over, and so was her career, her reputation, and her marriage. David walked across the ballroom and stood beside me. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said quietly. "I should have seen what she was years ago." "You see it now," I said, taking his arm. "That is what matters." 6 months have passed since that night at the Worthington Hotel. Tiffany was indicted on multiple counts of fraud, false advertising, and theft by deception. Her brand was dissolved, her assets were seized, and her 200,000 followers disappeared like morning fog. David filed for divorce the week after the gala, and it was finalized last month. I sit in my garden now, in my grandmother's armchair that has been returned to its proper place. The house is quiet again, repaired from the renovation damage that Tiffany's workers had inflicted. My first edition books are back on their shelves, and my antique writing desk sits by the window where it belongs. David visits every Sunday afternoon, bringing tea and pastries from the bakery I like. We talk sometimes about the past, about his grandmother and great-grandmother, about the family history he never knew. Sometimes we talk about the future, about healing and moving forward and building something better. Today he asked me about the brooch, which sits, as always, over my heart. "Will you ever sell it, Mom? It could change your life completely. You could travel, buy a new house, do anything you want." I touched the czar's tear gently, feeling its familiar weight against my chest. "It already changed my life, David. Not because of its price, but because of what it taught me." I looked at my son, at the man he was becoming now that the scales had fallen from his eyes, and because of what it taught you. The difference between value and cost. The difference between appearance and truth. David nodded slowly, and I could see that he finally understood. I returned to tending my roses in the afternoon sun, feeling its warmth on my face and hands. The brooch glinted softly on my chest. 30 carats of history, 5 generations of survival, and one lesson that my daughter-in-law learned far too late. Never judge what you do not understand. If your child's spouse humiliated you in public and stole your family's heirloom, what would you have done? Would you have confronted them immediately? Or would you have waited for the perfect moment like I did? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below because I truly want to know. And if this story about patience and justice resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. I share stories like this one every day, and I would love for you to be part of our community. Until next time, remember that the most valuable things often look worthless to those who cannot see beyond the surface.